In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, welcome to another session of lessons from my mother. We have hit the big 5-0. Congratulations to me, to my parents, to my friends and family who have supported me throughout this, and to anybody who's watching. I don't necessarily refer to people as viewers or audience in particular because I don't see myself as somebody who's on stage performing for an audience. This is just me sharing. So I could say audience or viewers, but I'd rather just use the term friends. So, my friends, thank you for whoever has watched this or will watch this or watched this a long time ago. I'm grateful. Uh, I'm glad that I'm hitting 50. I hope to reach 100 soon and then finish, turn it into a book, co author with my mother, get it signed, get it published, get it sold, and then hold like a big event at my college in Oxford for my mum. That's the goal with this whole thing. So let's see. I hope I'm able to do it. Right. Pray for me. Lesson number 50 is an interesting one because I have played around a bit with some original quotations. And let me elaborate them first before I delve into what my mum used to say. So there is a common quotation in English which traces its roots in German, and the quotation is "Blood is thicker than water." We know this quotation. It means that familial bonds are stronger than other friendships or chosen bonds, and it refers to blood in the body as compared to water of baptism. So the relations created by human beings are not as strong as relations created by nature or by biology, which is your brother and your sister, your mother, your father, and your children. These are blood relations. There are some scholars, some commentators, critics, thinkers in the broadest sense of the word who say that this is not the correct quotation. The correct quotation is the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb, which implies the exact opposite. It says that the blood of the covenant means the promises made between members of the army or military or blood brothers who have fought and either shed each other's bloods or shed somebody else's blood together. That is thicker than just your brother or sister or mother or father or children. It ties itself to a certain saying in Arabic which says that blood is thicker than milk. And there they use milk as an analogy, to refer to a mother's milk. So two brothers or siblings. Women don't fight in wars even today, not as much as men. So that's why they use the term brothers. So two brothers suckle at the same mother's breast. Pardon my French, but that's how they wrote it. So they're milk brothers. But the saying goes that the blood of the covenant or the promises made between warriors is stronger than that. So I've flipped that upside down because the first one we don't know which one is right, which one is wrong. But this one is referring to an Arabic quotation, and I'm saying milk is thicker than blood, which is I am stating my mother's lesson where she has said that your brothers come before everyone else. I don't have sisters. Obviously, we love our parents as we do, but to build the bonds of friendship, kinship, lifelong support between four boys in a house is difficult. Why is it difficult? Because boys, by nature, are destructive. And I don't use the term destructive negatively. I use the term, it's not pejorative or negative. I use it descriptively. We destroy to create. Like, there's a huge literature in the Hindu religion or Hindu mythology or the Greek or the Egyptian where you talk about creation through destruction or creative destruction. So boys, even if you look at their toys from a young age, they're breaking them apart and they're like, what? How does this work? That's how we are. And because of excitable personalities or energy and later in life testosterone, there's a lot of physical contact with each other. Now imagine four boys. Now, even if this bothers you, the biology or the truth of this bothers you, try to understand it socially. Whenever I've told anybody, oh, we're four brothers, everybody's like, "Ooh, your poor mum. Oh no, I suppose it's okay." What is that first reaction? If today's society is supposedly moving away from established norms or established structures of society, and I understand that it's post-structuralism, and obviously it impacts the West strongly because it's an individualist society. Collectivist societies hold on to their traditions more than the individualist ones. So I understand that it's post-structuralism and you're critiquing society. But even today, if you speak to somebody and they say, I have four sons, your first reaction isn't, wow, that must have been so easy. The first reaction for the mother is always, oh, that must have been hard. Why? Because even if you have trouble accepting the fact that boys are more excitable or more energized or more prone to conflict and testing their limits than girls are, you can test it socially. You can test it socially if you don't want to test it empirically. That's my point. But my mother knew this, and my mother is not a liberal or a modernist, so we're conservative, her and I. So we hold firm with what we believe. And she knew that raising four boys would be difficult because there's going to be a lot of physical fights, which they were. I'm telling you, they were. There were a lot of physical fights between me and my brothers, between all of us. The younger one is pretty much spared, but the older three, we've done a lot of damage. My brother once broke my tooth. This one, it has happened. I was 7. He broke my tooth. Happens all the time. I loved it. I'm so happy to have that relationship with him. But my mother was trying to teach us that this thing is stronger than any other thing, any other friend, any other employer, any spouse. I know this triggers some people in the West, or even any children. And you'd see, as when you're younger, you kind of accept it, but as you grow older, you're like, Mom, but not really my spouse. My mom would say, look, I'm not saying that you start dividing lines and you start denigrating your spouse. I'm not saying that. I'm explaining the extreme condition. I'm explaining if push comes to shove and you're at the final point of the line. I'm not saying don't try to negotiate with everyone all the time and try to appease and appeal and balance. I'm not saying don't do that. What I'm saying is that the foundation has to be constructed on something that is solid and continuous. And this man here, at that time he was a boy, this boy here is your brother, and nothing can change that. He will be your brother even after you die, even after he dies. I will be your mother and your father, we will be your parents, regardless of whatever happens to you or us. You came from my womb. That's what she would say. Everything else, you can always have more children. I know this upsets people. Fair enough. I grant you that it doesn't align with your worldview. Fair enough. You live in the West, whatever. Or even it's trickled down to other parts of the world. You can always have another spouse too. With the amount of divorce, separation, infidelity, adultery, all of these things taking place in society today and even before, spouses can change. Like, I used to have a spouse. I don't have that spouse anymore. It's gone. It's been years and years. But I've had the same three brothers for 36 years. How does that work? So she would try to inculcate the idea of replaceability. What's easy to replace? A business or a brother? And you'd say, a brother. And she'd say, the thing that is harder to replace is more valuable. I suppose there are some philosophical terms to explain what I'm saying. I don't know them. I think it's a scarcity or an abundance or value. I don't know the exact concept behind it. But the idea was this. Why is a gold watch or why is a Rolex more valuable than a regular Casio? So Floyd Mayweather, one of the greatest boxers of our generation, I think he bought a $19 million watch, if I'm not mistaken. It was multi-million. He bought a watch. I think it was a Rolex. I can't remember. He bought a very expensive watch. Imagine if 50 other people had the same watch. It wouldn't be as valuable. Things are valued by many aspects, but one of those aspects is certainly how replaceable they are. So, if you buy a Ferrari and everyone has a Ferrari, it doesn't really matter as much. I realized this when I was in my third year of undergrad studies as an architect. I got a BA, which is an A minus. I got an A minus on a project, and I was like, oh great, I got an A minus. And then I saw out of 13 students, 6 of us had A minuses, and the others were low, and one had an A plus. And I was like, that doesn't mean anything. If 6 of us got it, and I would meditate on this. Why did I suddenly feel that it wasn't as valuable? Because other people had it. So that's a larger conversation which doesn't play into this. But the role of replaceability, scarcity, is incredibly important. That's why diamonds are priced how they're priced, because accessing them isn't for everyone, right? That's why we have valuable minerals and valuable materials and so forth. And so she would try to train us in this mindset, and she would tell a story. I don't know if it were a fictional or a real story. I don't think this happens in real life, or maybe it could. We live in the 21st century. There's been a lot of centuries, many millennia before we were alive. So it could have been possible. A lot of folklore law is passed down through generations orally. So she would say that there was a woman who was given the impossible choice of choosing between her husband, her brother, and her son. And when my mum would tell us this, we wouldn't feel very happy because we would place our mother in that situation and say, of course, my mum would choose me. Of course, my mum would choose me. And she said, no, as much as I love you, I wouldn't be choosing you. I would choose my brother. I was like, what about dad? She was like, yes, your father is very important to me. You are very important to me. But I only have one brother. I'd say, but am I not valuable? She was like, you're absolutely valuable. But, and as we grew older, she would try to expand our mind in this direction. She'd say, look, I can always have another husband. If this doesn't work out, some other person could marry me. I might be able to have another child, but I can never have another brother. And that fact of it is incredibly important. And as we grew older, when we were younger, she would say, well, no, I'd choose my brother. And she'd quickly divert it towards, therefore, you should choose your brothers. But as we grew older, she explained it in a larger setting. In Urdu, she calls it pet ka rishta, which means the relationship of the womb. That's what she calls it. But in English, I've translated it to the milk, because that's the quotation. So she would elaborate it in that manner. Now let's look at society. Every time I've seen a Western movie, Hollywood, British, French, I have seen dysfunctional families. Dysfunctional families. Every time you show, even if it's a modern rom com, whatever, you show people who hate spending time with their parents, who hate spending time with their siblings. They create friendships and bonds with people, bonds which can be broken at any moment of time, bonds which break more often than not. People have lost thousands of friendships. Nobody's lost a brother until they die. The fact that you don't speak to them is a choice, but that person is still your sibling. So to say that Western society is something to emulate is a huge joke. I don't agree. This society here has crumbled and continues to crumble because the social fabric is quite scattered and disaggregated. I don't know if that's a word. There's no, because as a Muslim, I tend to believe family values, God, um, trust, loyalty, these things really matter to me. So I build all my relations based on trust, on loyalty, on truth, honesty, shared values, and so forth. Those are my relations. And the more I see, the more I live in America, in England, even in parts of Europe, maybe even parts of Canada, I've seen that there is a huge um, disaggregation, a dispersion, sorry. There's no cohesion. Um, and people really don't like spending time with their spouse, with their siblings, or their parents. So, and then you have children, and you want to be close to your children. But your children end up repeating the same behavior to you. They're like, "Oh no, my dad's a loser. My mum's not cool. My mum's very clingy or smothering, and so forth." Um, People say this all the time. I've heard this um, in real time, and I've always called it out because that is not something I stand for. So all my friends, I would say, yeah, 95% of my closest friends are incredibly close to their parents. There's one who I would slightly question, but almost all my friends are incredibly close to their parents. So those are bonds on shared values. But they know, and I know, that if ever there were a decision between me and their sibling, obviously they would choose their sibling. If I had to choose between my friends, best friends of 20 years, 15 years, 10 years, or any of my brothers, obviously it's going to be my brothers. That is something that my mum taught. Because a key aspect here is to learn to live with things that you don't always like or things that don't always make you happy. Why is that important training? Let me tell you first. One of my brothers is not the best manager of time. I try my best to be a good timekeeper, as is my father, as is my younger brother. Me and my brother argue on time all the time. If I could change this habit of his, I would. If he could change, because I can be very stubborn or very focused on something or very rigid, if he could change this about me, I know he would, but we can't. We can't change these things about each other, yet we must continue as kids to eat at the same table, to sleep in the same room, to go to the same school in the same car, to play with each other, play the same sport, same games, go to the cinema, drive, work, and so forth. We have to do all of that with someone whose every habit I don't appreciate. There's some that I have an issue with. That trains you to exist in the real world. When we come out in the real world as a child who hasn't really, as a child as a teenager who hasn't really experienced life, we want the world to be how we want it. Oh, I think businesses should be this, distribution of wealth should be this, healthcare should be free, education should be this, blah, 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 blah. All of that. I've been there. But then you start hitting real people mentally and spiritually. I mean, you start getting in contact with them, and people have different points of views. You go to an employer and say, "Well, I think I should be paid this much." I say, "No, I think you should be paid half or a tenth of that." And he said, "Well, I need the job, but I don't like this guy. I don't like how he's making me feel. But I'll stay with it, and I'll struggle, and I'll suffer, and I'll grow, and so forth." So that initial training of whether you like him or not, he is your brother. You have to learn to like him. You learn to like people. That's a concept that I didn't hear in the common parlance today. You learn to like people. You grow to like them. Today in the media, we're trying to show that you like or you dislike people instantly, but that's not true. A couple of my really close friends, in the beginning, we would never even talk to each other. We were like, that guy's an idiot. Now we've been friends for 15 years. So these things happen. Imagine if you have a child and the child isn't as pretty as you had expected. Well, the child suffers from any disability. Any, could be visual, auditory, verbal, physical, any disability, mental, any disability. Imagine if the child isn't as good at sports as you wanted them to be, or at school or whatever. Do you start disliking the child because they don't fit your narrow worldview of this is what I want? No. Why not? Well, because that's my child. Exactly. This is your sibling. This is your brother. Well, maybe they don't smell as good as you, or maybe they don't look as good as you, or maybe they don't run as fast as you, and so forth and so forth. But that is your brother. That is a relation that you're stuck with. A spouse, you're not stuck with a spouse. A friend, you're not stuck with a friend. A colleague or a boss or an employee, you're not stuck with them. All these relations can break. All of them. The relations that continue are those of blood or of milk, as I've said, as Mum has said too. Initially, I was reticent in accepting this. I was like, no, I'm friends with that person. I'm friends with that person. But even in my personal life, I have ended a friendship with somebody who I was incredibly close for 19 years. Yeah, for 19 years. Since 1999 till 2018. For 19 years, one of my closest friends, we're not friends anymore. 19 years. And it's not there anymore. You see what I mean? So these things, I'm not going to tell you why that happened, but it has happened. I know other friends. Who was it? I was just speaking to somebody a few days ago, and they were telling me, "Oh, that person and I were really close for 5 years or so, but now we don't speak to each other." Oh, what happened? Oh, blah blah blah, blah 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 happened. So we're not friends anymore. But you don't say that about your siblings. You don't say, "Well, we're not siblings anymore." You say, "Well, I don't talk to my brother." But in the time of need, that brother or sister is there for you more often than not. I know you'll find exceptions and argue with me. Well, I've heard a story. I know, fair enough. But the general probabilistic rule is this: that milk is thicker than blood. पेट का रिश्ता बाकी रिश्तों से ज़्यादा अहम होता है. And because I'm a Muslim, because I was, even though I was raised in England, I was born in Pakistan to Pakistani parents. I have a collectivist mindset. I don't have an individualistic mindset all the time. Although, being raised in England and then Turkey and then Canada, I am more self-focused than communal focused. But I still have that training, and in that training, the community looks after the individual. The village raises the child in those cultures. So I've seen how in difficult times, if families believe exactly what I'm saying, those families And even many times when they don't, they tend to hold each other accountable, but also in support all the time. They're strengthening each other. So that's a lesson I wish more people in Canada, England, America, maybe Europe even, try to foster, facilitate, and develop more. Um, because I see a crumbling of society taking place. I see strong divisions, um, politically and socially, and that's something that I don't I don't wish uh, for anyone to suffer through. So the family unit is the backbone of community or the neighborhood. And the neighborhood is the backbone of the community. Community is the foundation of society, and society is the foundation of the geography and the nation state. So if the family unit is solid, then everything can be solidified. If the foundation is weak, everything is weak. So the inherent and strongest focus should be on developing a strong family unit. And that doesn't mean just spouse, you, and the children. No, it means parents, it means siblings, and it means spouses of siblings and children of siblings. And you start building cohesively like that. Anyway, I've been talking for 26 minutes. Thank you so much for listening to me. Have a wonderful Monday and have a wonderful week ahead. Take care.